Hello and welcome to Cage Fighting, answering the big questions in film. Andy Gillard here, hello, and I hope you're keeping safe.
Hi everyone, it's Matt Guy, how are we all doing?
Hello, it's Stu Hall here, and very much the same. Welcome.
Thanks again for joining us on our second ever QuestionCast. If it's the first time that you're joining us though, let me give you a quick update on how we do things around here. This week we're going to talk about some questions and answers. And then next week, what we're going to do is going to have a deeper dive into one specific question. That question, of course, Nick Cage, good or bad? Last week, we watched both of the National Treasure films. They're available in the archives now. And we'll get on to where we're going with the picture pod in a little while. But first, we'll get some of the pod admin out of the way. So, guys, our little podcast, we're now on all the major providers. So if you're on Google, iTunes, Spotify, you can get us there. It's great. I've got to admit, I'm delighted with the initial response. How are we both feeling about this?
Yeah, really pleased. It's nice to get kind of the ball rolling and getting on all the major platforms is really, it's so weird just seeing something that's like startup us being straight away on Spotify, which I use and to all my podcasts, and we're kind of there amongst all of them. Really strange, but really glad that people have enjoyed it and commented so far, and please continue to do so.
Yeah, it was very similar for me, but it was as soon as we went on Podcast Addict, because that's the one that I use, and as soon as we popped up there because of the name, it was right at the top and in the centre as well. And because Inside Baseball, that I designed the cover art, and when that popped up, I thought, yes, we've made it.
We've made it.
Amazing. And obviously, please make sure you subscribe to the feed, so when the episode drops on a Monday morning, we'll be there waiting for you with open arms. Also, if you could give us a quick 5-star review, that would be awesome. If you've got a little bit of time, a review would be fantastic. We've already had 3 5-star reviews as well. And I'm not saying that one of them was mine, but the initials do ring true with one of the 3 of us. We've had one from Funky Monkey 3487, said that they loved the first episode. They're looking forward to the wonderful and bizarre questions that they didn't know we need answering. So if anyone has got any questions, or if Funky Monkey, if you've got a question you want answering, drop us a tweet. You can DM us or email us. Our Twitter handle is cagefightingpod. Our email is cagefightingpod@gmail.com. Oatcake46, excellent first episode, hugely entertained, and they've made a list of films worth trying, which is great because, as you both know, I have a list of everything that I have to watch. So I've got a tab on my Excel spreadsheet with all films that I hear on different podcasts. Okay. So if something rings a bell, I'm like, bang it in there. So I'm well up for making lists, and Oatcake is a person after my own heart, I must admit.
You should print these lists off. You should print them off and laminate them.
Well, they need updating, so it has to stay on. Otherwise, I would just be getting through so much paper. The final review is from ADG23. And they say, I like it a lot. Now, I reckon that might be a Dumb and Dumber reference.
I like it a lot.
Because, that is a cracking film. And if you do leave us a review, drop in a film reference. We'll see if we can spot it. I think that's a good idea.
I like it. Let's do it.
Yeah. So, question 1, this week and every week, it's going to be exactly the same. What have you been watching this week? Obviously, was it any good? Matthew, do you want to kick us off there?
Well, I've had a bit of a relax from kind of film and TV, and I've been doing a lot of playing and reading. So I've been playing a lot of the Resident Evil 2 remake, which for anybody that knows me, I'm not very good when it comes to scary things. So this has been very much playing it at my own pace, trying to keep a pair of fresh underwear nearby, basically. I used to like the Resident Evil films are on my list to watch over the next couple of weeks. I know that they're not quite in key with the games, or like following the plot release, because the games veer off in a really strange direction. By the time you get to 6, we're not fighting zombies anymore. We're fighting people in Africa and people with chainsaws and stuff like that. It was at number 4. But I've been reading The Stand by Stephen King as well, trying to get a bit more into Stephen King, and then not just watch his films, which I really like. Well, the films adapted from his work, but that's what I've kind of been doing at the minute. I need to get back and find something that hopefully you guys are going to tell me that I need to watch over the next week.
Well, I was just, when you mentioned Resident Evil, I've only ever seen the very first film when it first came out on a friend's dodgy pirated VHS, and that, like, you couldn't really see what was happening, and I never revisited it. So I was going to ask you if they're worth doing it, but I'm guessing you've not seen them. But Stu is nodding along. So Stu, Resident Evil, worth your time?
Colin Salmon's in the first one.
Oh, do you like Colin Salmon? Does he play a dodgy British possible villain?
Something happens to him. Let's just say that. So
Right,
no
okay.
spoilers. It's very in my wheelhouse of nonsense. They're nothing like the games whatsoever. They are their own thing, which is kind of keep the films and keep the games separate. It works better that way.
Yeah, I'd agree with all mediums. I think whenever you get an adaptation, it's so easy to compare it to the original that you're probably better off making it your own thing and having it completely different. A bit like how The Walking Dead has done that from the comic books. It's got the source material to sort of guide it, but the stories are seldom beat for beat the same thing. I think that tends to work best.
Yeah, and the Walking Dead games as well. The Telltale games are a separate story altogether.
Mm.
That works pretty well.
What have you been watching this week then, Stu?
It was the same kind of thing because of football being back. It was a lot of football, more than ever, you could say. And then on Friday, The Last of Us Part 2 arrived to a 2-disc fanfare that took nearly an hour to install. Play the first 3.5 hours of that, and that's just a spectacular piece of entertainment, let alone a game or whatever. It's a cinematic masterpiece already. I'm not going to say a single thing about it other than it's so far it's easily living up to the first one. But apart from that, I know last time when I watched the silly 365 Days film, this time I thought, oh yeah, on one of the other podcasts, obviously there is others available, they recommended it, and I'd never even heard of this film called Do the Right Thing.
Oh, the Spike Lee film?
Yeah, Spike Lee from 1989. Again, excellent. Very, very random thing, but just a quick synopsis off IMDb. So, on the hottest day of the year on a street in Brooklyn, everyone's hates bigotry, smoulders and builds until breaking point, effectively. And it's one of the things where everything that's going on in America at the minute, and kind of over here as well, to see a film that old tackling exactly the same situation as what's going on with race and all that kind of thing, and being a Spike, after you mentioned Black Klansman last time out as well, you can kind of see where that came from with this being one of his first films, and it was powerful. And I don't only get kind of, when I watch serious films, I kind of take it in, but this one kind of hit me. And I think maybe it's because of the times that we're living in and stuff like that, but it really is excellent. And I know obviously you've heard of it, Andy, but everyone I've mentioned it to has no clue what it is. It's just hidden away. And Matt's looking a bit lost as well.
No, well, it sounds really interesting, and it's one I'm probably going to check out, to be fair. At first, I thought you were describing Falling Down, in terms of like one man being tipped over the edge kind of thing, but it sounds like a bit more societal than that. Is that the kind of thing? It's like society's at the breaking point between races and violence and that kind of thing.
Well, you've got a mainly black neighborhood with some Koreans and obviously the white boys and a very, very young Gus Fring. Giancarlo Esposito's in it, weirdly enough. And a very, very young Samuel L. Jackson, playing a radio DJ, who's DJing out of his house by the looks of it. But yeah, it's very much a kind of late 80s, early 90s, massive boom boxes on the shoulder and Air Jordans and things like that. And it's, as a time capsule on itself, it's worth it. I think it's just over 2 hours long, or maybe exactly 2 hours. But just as a time capsule, and then you'd think, well, actually, it's not as 20, 30 years later, it's exactly the same. Things haven't changed. But yeah, I recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, I think you said powerful, and I think that's probably the best description of it. It's fantastic. But to further on from you watching Spike Lee, I actually watched a Spike Lee film this week as well. His new one, which has just dropped on Netflix, Da 5 Bloods. It's okay. It's probably not got the same impact as Do the Right Thing or possibly The Black Klansman. It's 2.5 hours. It's probably a little bit longer than it needs to be. It starts off quite slow, but once it gets going, it's excellent. And it's about 5 African Americans who fought in the Vietnam War, and then they returned to Vietnam many years later to uncover some gold that was hidden. And then once they get the gold, all hell breaks loose basically, and they've got to try and get out of the situation in one piece. Obviously, I don't want to spoil it, but I think once you get past the first sort of half an hour or so, it really does fly by. But it's just that first half an hour. The setting the scene takes a little bit too long for my liking. But I'd recommend that, like I do with every Spike Lee film, to be honest. Another film I watched was the Armando Iannucci, the David Copperfield movie. Now, I'm not a massive fan of Charles Dickens' work. I mean, other than The Muppets Christmas Carol, I wouldn't particularly go out of my way to watch any of his adaptations. I'm stumbling over my words there. But I really enjoyed that. And that might be because it's Armando Iannucci, and as far as I'm concerned, the man can do no wrong when it comes to comedy movies. So I would recommend watching that. It's a story of a young adult who goes through the trials and tribulations of his life and how he comes out the other side of it. Again, don't want to give too much away. Good story, some fantastic acting. Tilda Swinton's in it, who is always incredible. So, yeah, the David Copperfield movie.
Is that an old one?
No, it was out at the end of last year.
Oh, okay.
It was in the cinema, at the end of last year, and I think it's just been released on VOD now.
Oh, that's one I completely passed me by.
It didn't get a lot of fanfare. I think I picked it up on Kermode and Mayo podcast when it was released, because every time Armando's on, I always have to listen to his interviews, because he's very worldly and he's always got good opinions about everything, not just about films.
Okay.
Something that, yeah, it's really good. And if you like Armando, I mean, if you've seen The Death of Stalin, it's quite similar in tone to that, more so probably than The Thick of It or In the Loop. The next film that I was going to say that I watched actually ties into the next question. So I'll give you the question. The answer is going to be my review. Question 2. Can you tell me about a director who you find often makes the same mistakes in all of their films and it always takes you out of it? Now, the reason I asked this question is this last week I watched The King of Staten Island, which is a Judd Apatow film. And I find with pretty much all of Judd Apatow's movies, they always start off with the first half an hour being quite snappy, and there's a lot of gags thumbed in quite early. And then it gets really sort of drawn out in the second act, and they go through the trials of what's happened, and they sort of break the characters down before then coming back for the final hurrah where everything works out in the end. And I always find that those middle acts, they drag so much that you lose the comedy from the beginning and you don't care about the payoff at the end. And for an example of this, I think the Knocked Up, and I love Seth Rogen, I really do. But again, this film, that middle portion of that film, it's a 2-hour-20 film, if I remember correctly, or 2 hours 10. But that middle portion just drags, and it sucks the life out of every movie. I almost feel like Judd Apatow needs to get a decent editor on board just to cut out some of the flab in that in the second act. So, Stu, would you like to tell us about a director who you can't quite get to grips with because they always make that same mistake?
You know, before I say mine, I hadn't really considered that, but now thinking about Knocked Up, that's exactly beat for beat exactly what you've just said.
Yeah, it's the same if you think of The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Heavy gags at the front, mawkish in the middle, and then a little bit of a payoff at the end. It's just Judd Apatow's way, I think.
Yeah, even I'm learning things on here. It's only week 3. Mine, again, because of the very topical, I suppose. I'm not going to use examples, but Tarantino and the N-word, which I mentioned when I watched Django Unchained for the first time since watching it in the cinema. And yeah, in that one, you can kind of think, oh yeah, of the time, and it makes sense with the slavery and stuff. But in Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown and just the ones off the top of my head, when I was thinking about it last night, I thought it's a bit over the top. And I know they were of the time and they were done deliberately, and he really doesn't care what he does anyway. and he does things for impact. But it just seems, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of virtue signaling and being all woke and whatever. But even for me, it's just a bit too much sometimes.
I think I completely agree. I like Tarantino, but his use of the N-word, it's gratuitous, I think is the word. It's almost like I can use it, so I will. Not because I need to, but because I can. And language is such a powerful tool that when used correctly, it's incredible. But it's also, if you use it too often, it cheapens it. And I find that Tarantino does veer to that side of things a little bit too often for my liking.
Yeah, and when I was reading about Django Unchained last night, and there's a thing about again on the IMDb factoids about Leo DiCaprio saying that he had to call cut on one of the takes because he was saying it too much and it was upsetting him.
Can you imagine?
And Samuel L. Jackson turned around to him and said, "This is just a normal Tuesday for us. Just carry on." So you kind of, okay, fair enough. You kind of make light of it, but it was just one or two. Okay, fine for impact, but like you said, it does cheapen it, and it just kind of, it's like, okay, we've done this now. Move on, something else.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Matt?
Yeah, mine. I mean, it's all subjective, and as an actor, you might really enjoy his work, but mine is kind of Tim Burton's consistent and almost insistent use of Johnny Depp in nearly everything that he does, and to some extent,
Somebody said it.
to some extent, Helen Bonham Carter, but not to the same extent. Tim Burton, when asked about this, because he has been asked, he said something that just struck me as really bizarre, and so I'm going to read it out to you now. Johnny also understands physical humour and movement and things like that, and he's just got expressive eyes. That is almost one of the most important things to me. And this is describing an actor who looks confused and almost aroused in the Sauvage advert for aftershave. I just don't get it. I just don't. Him being cast in the films it's very jarring, and his performances just take out some of the kind of sweetness in some of the roles, like Edward Scissorhands. And what I wanted to do, I want you to tell me the films that Johnny Depp and Tim Burton have appeared in. A little quiz for you while we're here. There are 8 films, and I want you to tell me them. Can you do such a thing?
Obviously, you've just mentioned Edward Scissorhands, because I think that's probably his best one.
Mm-hmm.
Alice in Wonderland.
Correct.
Oh God, hated that film. The Demon Barber. What was that one now? Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber. Yeah.
This is one of these things. If you put this in the group chat beforehand, you think, we'll get these straight away. But now you put us on the spot.
Yeah. No, the pressure.
Well, for the sake of easy listening, I'm going to run through them. But if you're listening at home, give it a pause, try and write them down, and see if you can get these. So we had Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, 94, yes. Sleepy Hollow, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, Sweeney Todd, as you mentioned, Alice in Wonderland, and then most recently Dark Shadows. And I look at any of those, and none of them, I think to myself, God, Johnny Depp was great in this. This film is made better for having him in, especially Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because the original is so beloved to me that I thought it was a real butchering of the role.
Yeah.
So rightly or wrongly, that's my pick. Tim Burton's excessive use of Johnny Depp.
I'll defend him on Corpse Bride, though. I mean, that he's animated, so it is a bit of a stretch. But that's an all right film for what it is. He kind of works
again. A lot of these are, quite happy isn't the word I want to use, but the tone is he's kind of very happy, jolly in a way. Even Sweeney Todd, not the musical numbers, considering it's about a demon murderous barber. They're just the feel of the films. It's just too nice for me. It's just too nice. I like things to be a touch edgier than that, to be honest. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree. I've never really been a big fan of Tim Burton. I find my criticism of him is that he gets praise for doing stuff that a lot of foreign directors do, but because he's a more mainstream director, they think he's a genius. No, he's not. He's just ripped off like Murakami and the guys and other Japanese directors, and that's always kind of bugged me that Yeah, he gets undue praise, personally. And plus, the Planet of the Apes film he did was absolutely dreadful.
God.
Just the worst.
I'd completely forgot that thing even existed.
I saw it at the cinema, and I've not been able to stomach it again. Even when I do a rewatch of the Planet of the Apes series, because the other films are fantastic, I won't watch that one because it's just the worst.
Well, it just stands alone in the middle of just being a joke.
It adds nothing.
The original 5 or 7 or however many there ended up being, and then the new 3, which are great. But yeah, that one, she was in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of her in pretty much anything. The only film of Helena Bonham Carter's I am a fan of is Fight Club. But even that, I think, has possibly aged quite poorly. But Fight Club, her best performance for my money.
Well, I want to know, guys, my question for this week. I want to know, what is the most quotable movie for you? What film do you find yourself quoting at any given opportunity? Stu, do you want to go ahead?
I have to think quite hard about this because I don't really do quotes of anything because my memory's so bad, mainly through alcohol abuse. But thinking about it, it's probably Airplane.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Just
Excellent.
Don't call me Shirley and things like I picked the wrong day to stop smoking, stop drinking, sniffing glue. And it's just things like, are you nervous? And it's first time he went, no, I've always been nervous. Just silly deadpan nonsense like that. And it's just witty responses, which I've kind of done for a long time anyway, in certain circumstances. So it probably is Airplane for me.
That is a good choice, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy?
No, I wasn't quite sure which way we were going to be looking at this. So I've got one choice, which is my favourite quotes in a film, and I've got one, which is probably ones I use most. Mm-hmm. So I think the ones that I use most is probably Wayne's World.
Okay.
Across both of them, I mean, I think they're a great pair of films. But yeah, so live in the now. I think that's great advice from Garth. We're not worthy. I wouldn't say Milwaukee. I would say Milwaukee because of Alice Cooper in that film. When you order a Chinese, you ask for a cream of some young guy. Yeah, it's excellent. But the film that I think has probably got the best quotes is Hot Fuzz.
Put a sock in it, town mouse.
Yeah, you want to be a big cop in a small town? Fuck off up the model village.
And I'm going to apologise now because if I do a Bristolian accent, it's going to sound fucking dreadful. But
you've got to do it now.
I've got to try at least. So I think if you want to be a big cop in a small town, fuck off up the model village. I think he's such a great line. He's not Judge Judy and Executioner. Wonderful. Obviously, the greater good. That is something that I think we do say often. Yeah. Have you ever shot your guns in the air and yelled, ah? Brilliant. I suppose you're wondering why we call them the Andes, because they're both called Andrew. Also, talking to them's an uphill struggle, isn't it, Dad? Yeah. So, it's Wayne's World or Hot Fuzz for either answer to that question. They're my two. What about you, Matt? What's your quotable?
Mine, it was Airplane, to be fair, and for exactly the same reason as Stu, because it's just it's so deadpan and it's so just hilarious. Like, it really is hilarious, but it's my kind of like almost version on dad humor, very pun as well.
I flew single-engine fighters in the Air Force, but this plane has 4 engines. It's an entirely different kind of flying altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
Even just the comedy itself in the film's excellent. Like when one of the passengers is being hysterical, and one by one they all come around to slap her around the face, like trying to like keep her calm. It's just a really excellent film from a quotes point of view. I think it's a real sleeper for some people. Much like I mentioned a couple weeks back about Spinal Tap, some of the humour in the film is probably not for everybody now. I don't think like the real fast-paced gags is kind of humour that people would enjoy nowadays, but I've been watching the film about 20 years now, and I just think it's absolutely hilarious, and there's some really great quotes from it. And if you haven't seen it, please go out of your way to give it a go, because it's a proper, gag a minute comedy where every time that you watch it, you'll find something else funnier when you see it. Really, and the second one's good as well, to be fair.
Yeah. But I think, like, when you think of "Don't Call Me Shirley," I mean, that is such an iconic line that I think I knew that line before I'd even seen the film. It's one of the, it not translates. What's the word? It transcends the film itself. It's fantastic, and I love the fact that then you go from Airplane, and then you've got the Naked Gun series, which are just phenomenal movies that probably don't get the love that they deserve. Partly because O.J. Simpson's in them, but they're just wonderful, wonderful films. And they've kind of been bastardized a little bit when you look at like Date Movie and Epic Movie and Scary, because they're just not particularly funny films, but they try that same kind of humour. So if you think that Airplane is just going to be like an older version of Scary Movie, it really isn't. It is a million times that movie. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. You put it in a lot better words than I can, to be fair.
It's not even of its time, because I think obviously there probably is a few things. I mean, the autopilot being an inflatable man, and he's how he gets inflated in his groinal area. It's just silly nonsense comedy like that. Like you said, Matt, it's proper dad jokes, and it's great.
Yeah. And I think like the older I get, the more I enjoy it. Like in a really silly way. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I think from silly things, the complete opposite of silly things. Well, depends which way you take it. My question this week was going to be, what was the last film that made you cry? Andrew?
Right, okay.
Now, here we go.
I know. I cry at films all the time. I'm terrible for it. I'm quite a stony person, generally speaking, but if I'm watching a film, I blubber. So, as ever, I've answered it by giving a couple of examples. When I watched Marriage Story at Christmas time, it absolutely destroyed me. I couldn't tell you many films which have made me just break down, but Marriage Story reduced me to bits. The performance from Adam Driver was, I'll be honest, this is a hill I will die on. He should have won the Oscar this year. It shouldn't have been Joaquin Phoenix. It should have been Adam Driver for that performance. Because the way he showed the bare bones of a human being who had been taken to his edge during his divorce from Scarlett Johansson's character, it was devastating. And I got all the way through the film, and then right at the very end, I was just in bits. For like a good half an hour or so, I couldn't hack it. It broke me mentally. That wasn't the last film, because I think I watched that the day before I went to see Little Women, which I saw at the cinema. And there's the bit where, spoiler alert, but Beth dies, and I didn't realise that she dies. And it's so sad. And I was just wiping a tear away from the corner of my eye, and this woman had brought a baby into the screening. So this baby interrupted my crying by crying, and it really pissed me off. I was not happy. And the final film I was going to mention, it's a film that always devastates me, and it's My Girl. I mean, it's a 29-year-old film. I saw it at the cinema when I was 8 years old, and it broke my heart then. And it was on Channel 5 not that long ago. And as I was flicking through the channels, it landed on My Girl in the funeral scene. I hadn't seen the rest of the film or anything. I knew exactly what was going on. And I broke down, because My Girl gets me every single time. It's incredible. What about you, Matt?
Okay, we're going to go from the ridiculous to the serious here, but one thing, and I'm not saying it makes me cry, I just want to say one thing that makes me sad, not cry. So I'm going to put the disclaimer out there right now. Oh dear. Bean, the ultimate disaster movie. Man, when that family shunned Bean, I'm telling you, Rowan Atkinson deserves some kind of applaud, because he, for a ridiculous character, he's really sad. It's properly sad. Like they just, he's just left on his own, and he's this strange man in a strange land that doesn't understand, the cultures, and he's just left on his own. And I just think to myself, man, imagine if that was you. It'd just be really sad. But there we go. Now back to the legitimate. A TV show I want to just shoehorn in. The Queen of Sheba episode of the Royal Family. So through all of the royal family, this is one of the later episodes. You've got Jim and his mother-in-law, who are really, I wouldn't say hate each other, but they're backwards and forwards, always bickering, always arguing. And the Queen of Sheba, I mean, it's been out years now, so I'm not going to feel bad about spoiler alerts, but it's basically the story of the nan of the family passing away. And having kind of been through a very similar scenario where in my own real life where my nan had deteriorated over time, and you say your goodbyes in the hospital before she passes away. If I watch that, guaranteed tears all over the place. Like it takes quite a bit for me to get emotional in a film, but this show, it's awful, and I think it's encapsulated by they do a point of view shot from the nan with all of the cast saying their goodbyes, pretty much. And it's really sad because these are characters for the whole show. All we do is ridicule them for how kind of dumb they are. We don't really get real emotion out of them that isn't something that's comedic. And then we see this, and it absolutely breaks me every time. Really, really, really. Like it's so bittersweet because it's for me a really funny program, but that episode just breaks me. Film wise, I think the last film that really made me cry was The Pursuit of Happiness, Will Smith. When he's in the toilets and someone's banging on the door and he's got nowhere to take his son, he just really hit home for me. I don't know. I think I said it on either the first or second podcast. All the best cowboys have daddy issues is like a phrase. Well, it's an episode of a Lost episode, believe it or not. But it's just that father-son relationship thing, for whatever reason, really hit me. And I just felt so sorry for Will Smith's character in that, just thinking that he must be verging on suicidal in not being able to provide for his own son and being in these conditions. And it just really, really hit me. And I just, it was an uncomfortable watch. It still is an uncomfortable watching it, and it gets me as well. But yeah, there you go. From the ridiculous to Will Smith and back.
I do like Will Smith. I think he's an underrated actor.
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously known for being his big, outlandish characters. Mm-hmm. But, you know, in films like Pursuit of Happiness and also his performance in Concussion, I think that is such a good, powerful performance from him. And I don't think he gets the respect that he's due in doing these more sort of these quieter roles as he does sort of doing like when he's in Independence Day or the Bad Boys films.
Yeah, it's a shame that he'll get kind of lumbered into those roles and not be taken a bit more seriously as an actor. But performances in these roles shows a bit of depth that you might overlook. But yeah, Pursuit of Happiness for me. Yeah, get the tissues ready.
In mine, with as you expect, slightly different.
Listen, Stu, Transformers is not a sad film, mate. I don't want to
as I say, it's a spoiler, but when Prime goes down that first time, it's actually on the notes. But now that there was every year when the music in Home Alone at the end, the actual score kicks in at the end of the film, and it's always like, oh. But on a similar note, Claws, the Netflix Christmas film from last year.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
It was. I was so surprised. I mean, I know it had been hyped up all year end that Netflix were doing these things. I mean, J.K. Simmons, Rashida Jones, and John Schwartzman, and it's incredible. I mean, we're obviously not go into it. Just watch it. This Christmas or October when it is officially Christmas anyway. About a postman who gets sent to the North Pole, and it's like the birth of Santa and all this stuff. But it's just a really, really emotional, really, really lovely film. And the other one was Dunkirk. And I know I think it might have been about the whole experience about just watching that me and my brother watching it, and it was a completely dead cinema. Everyone was completely silent from start to finish. And I mean, when we found out later that a lot of it was improvised as well, and it wasn't really scripted. And it was been a Nolan film as well. Obviously, that's the reason we went. And it was just one of them where there's just things that happen towards the end where it's just really got us. I mean, both of us. I mean, we didn't speak to each other at all until we got back to the car. It was just, it finished. Everyone sat in the seats. Obviously, there was going to be no end credit scene, but everyone just sat there, like pure respect for the film, and then just got up and left, and no one said a word. And it was just really powerful. And I don't know if that's going to stand by and stand up when I watch it again on VOD or Blu-ray or whatever. But for that moment we were in, that was special.
Yeah, that's nice. That's like when something hits you like that you can't form a sentence, or you just can't say anything, and almost out of respect for the film, I don't know, but you know, when something hits you like that, it is strange. It's that question really, like, why do we go to cinema? To get scared, or to cry, or hear, you know, or feel these horrible emotions? Like, why do we put ourselves through the misery of it? But when you get that film, it is magical, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really is. I think the last film that I saw that did that was 12 Years a Slave.
Oh.
I remember watching it and then just sitting there thinking a million different thoughts of how on earth did this happen, and why are we so shitty to each other? It's
yeah.
And honestly, that film just broke me. It felt like it was something that would change you fundamentally if you saw it, because it was just so powerful.
Or not 7 Years a Slave, as the barber told me, which must have been an edited version of it. A film like that.
Version.
Yeah,
a film like that for me, to be fair, was when Four Lions. When the end of Four Lions, I honestly didn't know what to feel in the cinema, because I saw it in the cinema when it was released, and I just didn't know what to feel. I thought, like, oh, there's a punchline coming here somewhere, there's a gag coming here somewhere. And I just didn't know what to feel. It was so strange. It was like, and I've watched it since, and it doesn't quite have the same effect, because I know what's happening, kind of the Lucky Number 11 effect. But it was just, yeah. When those films hit you, they hit you hard. But I suppose that's why we really enjoy it, isn't it? To feel the wide range of the spectrum of emotions, isn't it?
It is. I think it's a way of experiencing things, but in a sanitized way. It's like there's no way that you can experience horror in a safe way, is that? I mean, if you're out in the streets and you feel in danger, you're in danger.
Yeah.
If you feel it in a cinema, you're still safe, but you're experiencing that anxiety, but in a safe way, really. So I think that's part of why we go to the cinema. That's part of why we watch films like ridiculous horror films that scare the shit out of you, is so that you can experience it, but know that at the end of it all, you're going to be safe.
Yeah. Or do what I do and just be like, yeah, I'm just going to grab do you want a drink from the kitchen or whatever? Yeah.
Just need to put the light on for a minute. So
just make sure the door's locked. Yeah, no worries.
Oh, the only time I've ever done that, it was on a TV show. I was watching the X-Files, and there's the episode with Eugene Toombs, who can creep through letterboxes, and I actually had to check the letterbox after that episode. Yeah, it probably got me, that one did.
My sister, because she had an air vent in her bedroom, and we had to cover it up. Mum had to cover it up because she watched it. I mean, that was in the first series as well, and so that was 94.
Yeah.
So she would have only been about 4 or 5, and which obviously at that time only having one telly in the house, so she was downstairs and we was watching it, and it probably scared the shit out of her. And even though that Eugene Victor Toombs to us, shut up. Or the second episode, Squeeze, which came later on. But yeah, that was for a small child. That The Fly got me like that as well. When I watched The Fly when I was 9.
That is too young to watch The Fly, to be honest.
Obviously the Jeff Goldblum version. But I had to sleep in Mum's bed at the bottom of the bed for 3 months, so I was traumatized. And I wouldn't go in anywhere like when she had a separate toilet and bathroom rooms, and because it was a small enclosed space like a teleporter, I wouldn't go in there with the door shut.
That's funny.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. The power of film.
Yeah, it's the best. Honestly, there's nothing quite like it. I suppose that's why we do this podcast, isn't it? Because it has that impact on you that it makes you just want to talk about anything and everything. So thank you for joining us for another week. Next week, obviously, we're on to the Picture Pod, where we'll be dissecting two of the most iconic Cage performances. They're two of the most iconic films of the 90s. And they're also two films that received Oscar nominations, if you'd believe it. That's right. We are discussing 1996's The Rock and 97's Con Air. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Cage Fighting's QuestionCast. Please remember to subscribe and leave a review. We'll even read out our favourites on future pods if you do. If you like what we do, please tell a friend. Actually, tell two. Why not? You can follow us on Twitter @CageFightingPod. Email us with any questions you want answering, serious or not serious. Or if you've got any anecdotes, you can find us at cagefightingpod@gmail.com. Stu, would you like to say goodbye?
Yeah, goodbye. See you on the next one.
Matt, would you like to say goodbye?
Ciao, Bella.
And it's goodbye from me. And remember, be excellent to each other.
Oh, I almost forgot. This year Garth finally got pubes.
You didn't tell him about my pubes, did you?
No, of course not.